My father, he just retired after 41 years working for the same company. And I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. 41 years in one place. Like that's rare today, don't you think? So many people are hopping job to job, and my dad, like faithful, steady servant, 41 years in the same company, working there almost his entire life. And he just retired. So we're like, Dad, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Let's celebrate your retirement. He says, I want to go to Disneyland. So we're like, all right. So we get the whole family, my brothers and I. One of our brothers couldn't make it, but we grabbed our wives and our kids, and we all met up in California over the break, and we did Disneyland and another theme park, and it was a good time. But the best part of the whole trip for me, the most memorable part for me of the whole trip actually didn't happen at the theme parks, okay? We had one day off in between, because you need a break after a full day at a theme park, right? Anybody been there? Like your feet are killing you. Everybody's angry and mad at each other because you've been standing around in lines all day, right? So we had this day off in between. And we used it to celebrate my dad. We had a big party for him. We got some cake and we got some food. We had some ice cream, And there was this one moment at that night where we were all sitting around this big round table that we had at the place we were staying. All 11 of us sitting around this table, and we're eating our ice cream and our cake, celebrating my dad. And I just said, hey, let's honor Dad. Like, what are some stories? What are some things that you remember about him that he's left an impression on you over these last 41 years of him working? And it was a great time, a beautiful moment. We started off with some funny stories, right? Like how my dad is a terrible cook. Right? Like he didn't cook indoors. He cooked outdoors, right? He was a griller, right? But every time he grilled, he would burn everything, right? I don't know if he just didn't pay attention or what, but it was always burnt. And he would try to convince us that that's just the way he liked it. Right? And we're all just like crunching the chicken, like, I don't know if it's supposed to taste like this. That's the way I like it. Okay. And so we laughed about that until when my sister-in-law came along and actually taught him how to grill. Now he's actually a pretty good cook. But back then we used to laugh about that. Those are kind of some funny things, but we also talked about some of the serious stuff. And some people with tears in their eyes were just telling stories about how, he was just a great dad. He was a faithful father. I'm very blessed to have him. He put God first in everything he did ever since he became a Christian back when he was in college. And he was go to church every single weekend with us. He was an elder at the church eventually. He was always singing up in the choir and the praise team and that kind of thing. And my dad he loved the Lord. And he put God first, and then he put his family right there, right underneath it. He'd be working all day, really, really hard, have huge projects he had to do. But he'd always come home for dinner to be with his kids and to be with his family. And my mother even was sharing some stories that I didn't even know about when I was little, that my dad would come home, he'd have dinner, he'd play with me and my brothers, and we'd all be hanging out. He'd put us all to bed, and then he'd have such a high workload. He'd have to go back to work some nights and work late into the evening to get what he had to get done. But he did that so that he could be home with his family and still spend time with us, and we didn't even realize it. And so things like that just showed me like how just thankful I am to have a dad who was like that. This is the kind of legacy that he left for me and he left for my brothers that we want to continue on and pass down to our kids. Somebody who loves the Lord and somebody who is faithful in serving others, always putting others above himself. Pretty awesome. And we got to do this, it's something you usually do like when someone's dead, right? And we're sitting there, we get to do it right in front of him. It was a beautiful moment, just honoring him for the way that he's led our family. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because what this did is it got me thinking about legacy. It got me thinking about what kind of legacy will I leave behind? This is my father's legacy that he's left for me. What kind of legacy will I then pass on? What kind of legacy will you pass on? What kind of legacy will we have? You might be thinking, Brandon, I'm not going to have a legacy. Like my life is pretty boring. I don't really do anything exciting and don't really make much of a difference whether I'm here or not. Like it's not much of a legacy. And I want to tell you, if that's you thinking that today, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Here's the thing that I know is true, is that everyone leaves some kind of legacy. Every one of us leaves some kind of a legacy, whether, some of them may be better than others, right? The real question is, what kind of legacy will you leave? Some people leave a legacy that is a blessing to the people around them who got to know them. Other people leave a legacy that's a curse. Some people leave a legacy that will be remembered for years and years to come, and others leave a legacy that is quickly forgotten. Everybody leaves some kind of legacy. The question is, what kind of legacy will you leave? What kind of impact will you have with the one and only life that God has given you? And so I want to ponder that question as we look at the Bible, because the Bible is full of examples of people who left these legacies that we still talk about today, some better than others. But today I want to look at the legacy, a positive legacy of Joshua. So if you got a Bible, turn with me to Joshua chapter 4. That's where I want to look at this morning. Joshua chapter 4. We'll put it up on the screens here in a minute. But I want to help us understand kind of where we get to before we get into the Bible here. If you know the story, the people of Israel were in slavery in Egypt for a couple hundred years, right? And then they eventually, God raises up Moses. Moses helps the people come out of slavery. God rescues the people. He helps them. They part the Red Sea so that they can escape. You've probably heard the story, right? Closes it back up after them. And the people are finally free from slavery, but they go into the wilderness. And on their way to the promised land, the Israelite people do what they did. And they often grumbled and they complained and they did a bunch of things they shouldn't be doing. And God says, okay, enough. You all don't get it to go into the promised land. You're going to be in the wilderness for 40 years until this generation passes away and the next generation is born and raised up and they can go and then inherit the promised land. So that's the story. And here we are in Joshua 4. Joshua is now the leader of the Israelite people. Moses has passed away. He's handed off the mantle to Joshua, and Joshua is responsible for bringing the people finally into the promised land. It's the next generation, right? They're going to the promised land, the land that God had already said that they were going to get to. And so here's they are. They're on the bank of the Jordan River. They're on the east side, looking into what is now Israel, that the land that God had promised to them. And here's the problem. The Jordan is flooding. It is overflowing the banks. The Bible tells us it is just this big river, and they're like, there's no way we can get across. Here we are on the precipice of entering the promised land, and here's this barricade. What are we going to do? Right? Are we going to have to wait longer in the wilderness, Lord? And God does what God does. He says, don't worry, I got this, right? And if you read the story, he tells Joshua, he's like, look, I want you to get the priests. I want you to have them carry the Ark of the Covenant. You know the Ark of the Covenant? If you've seen Indiana Jones, you got an idea of what it looks like, right? It's this big golden box with these like angel wings, and then they have all the 10 Commandments and other things in there. So they got the priests. They're carrying this big golden box on their shoulders on these poles, and he says, have them march into the river with the Ark of the Covenant. And I'm sure the priests are thinking, that's a good idea. Let's carry a giant gold heavy box into the middle of the river. I'm sure it'll go well for us, you know? But they're faithful. They do what God asks them to do. And so the priests, they carry the ark, and as soon as their feet hit the water, God does what he did to the Red Sea for Moses. He parts the Jordan for Joshua, and the people, all of Israel, marches across on dry land across the Jordan. It's a miracle. It's incredible, right? And all the people are just in awe of God and how great he is, and it's an amazing time. And Joshua, while he's still standing in the middle of the Jordan on the dry ground, says, I'm going to have a moment here where I'm going to leave a legacy for the future generations. We can't forget what God just did here. So that's where we're at. Joshua chapter 4, verse 5. Here's what it says. And Joshua said to them, pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel. And this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. Now notice he says it's a sign and it's a memorial. I'll get back to that in just a little bit. But if you jump to verse 20, the story continues. It says, and these 12 stones, which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. That's an encampment place that they had on the west side of the Jordan River on the way to Jericho, which is where they were going next. So he sets up these stones there. And he said to the people of Israel, when your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know, Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So here's Joshua creating a legacy right here in this moment, right? I'm going to take these 12 stones. We're going to set up this memorial, this sign to God. It's part of Joshua's legacy. And notice he says in verse 6 that it's a sign, and he says in verse 7 it's a memorial. And I think that's kind of important. Think about this, okay? It's a memorial in the sense that it's a reminder of what God did in the past. It's a reminder to the people when they see it. The whole point was the children would see this pile of rocks and they'd go, what is that? What's that all about? And then it would be an opportunity for the parents to tell their kids, this is what God did for us. This is who God is. This is how mighty he is, right? He parted this sea. That's pretty awesome. He parted this river. And so it was a memorial in the sense of what God did in the past, but then it was also a sign. And what does that mean? It was a sign of what God would do and would continue to do into the future. Not just in the past, but who God is now. He wasn't just mighty then, he's still mighty now. He didn't just save us then and rescue us then. He's going to continue to rescue us and fulfill the promises that he's laid out for us. Look at verse 24. It says that he did this so that all the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, not was mighty, not God used to be. God did some good stuff. No, God still is mighty. He still is powerful. He still does rescue today and forever, so that the people would fear the Lord forever, that we would have this awe and just wonder at how great and majestic and powerful and mighty God is to save, both in the past, what he's done, and what he's continuing to do today and forevermore. It's pretty powerful stuff there. These 12 stones were part of Joshua's legacy as he went and he built the nation of God's people in the promised land. This would be a part of it. And you know the story of the Israelite people, right? They didn't always get it right. They went off and they did, sometimes they'd worship God, and then other times they would totally go astray. And as that happened, these stones were hopefully part of something that it would be a memorial that would call the people back to remember who God is. And it would be a sign when the people repented and they turned to God and they're going through wars and difficulties and trials, that they would remember this sign of how powerful God is, how he saves, and how he will continue to fill out his promises. Right? It's incredible. This was his legacy. Now, I made this picture. These are my artistic rendition of 12 stones. And my daughter over here, she told me it looks like a pile of pills. I'm like, these aren't pills. They're river rocks. Okay? What kind of drug addict am I raising here? I don't know. Just kidding. I'd embarrass her a little bit. I told her I was going to do it, but that's okay. This was what it was, right? These stones there was no plaque. The whole point was to spark the kids to ask questions so the parents would have an opportunity to remind them of their legacy, remind them of who God is and what he did. And notice Joshua didn't set these stones up and say, these are the stones of Joshua, a monument to me. Right? He didn't say that. He didn't even make a monument to Moses, their fearless leader before him. This was a monument, a memorial to God forever. And that is what our legacy needs to be today. Not about us, but about the God that we love and the God that we serve. Those are the kind of legacies that last. Those are the kind of legacies that make a difference. Jesus even said, the greatest among you, if you want to be great, the greatest among you is going to be the one who's the servant of all. Not the one who's in charge or makes the most money or has the most fame. It's the one who serves the most people, the one who serves God first and foremost. You want to be great, that's how you do it. And that's not what most of us think about when we think about legacy, is it? When we think about legacy, a lot of the times when we're pondering like what a legacy is or what our legacy could be, what we often think about is maybe I gave so much money to that organization that they built a building and put my name on it, right? That one's named after me. That's my legacy. Or maybe it's I did something so great and so awesome that they made a statue of me. And they wrote about me in the history books. That's my legacy. Or maybe I built this company, or I piled up this wealth and I left this inheritance to my kids and my grandkids, and this is my legacy. Look at this blessing I have passed on to them. And look, none of these things necessarily are bad. Right? These can all be good things. There's nothing necessarily wrong with all these things, but I would argue that they're not necessarily the best things. They're not all the greatest things, but they're not necessarily bad things. Like look at Proverbs 13:22. It says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. So it can be good to leave an inheritance to your kids and to your grandkids. If you have the means to do that, by all means, that's a wonderful blessing maybe in their lives. That's great. And the Bible's saying those who are sinners, eventually their money is just going to be taken from them and given to somebody else. But it's more than just the physical things we pass on. Greater than that is the spiritual inheritance that we leave behind, the inheritance of faith that we leave for our children and our grandchildren. Don't waste your life building a legacy that's just for yourself. I mean, how sad of a life is that, right? If I build this statue, look at all I've accomplished. I made a statue to Brandon. Isn't that great? Aren't I awesome? How sad would that be, right? like, come on. If it's all about you, there's nothing exciting about that. Eventually all of us, most of us, most of what we do is going to be forgotten, whether it's in the next generation or the generation after that, or how many of us remember our great-great-grandparents? Eventually that's all going to fade. So what kind of legacy are we going to leave? Is it going to last? Jesus kind of said it this way in Matthew 6:19. He said, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Laying up earthly treasures is not the kind of legacy that we need to be shooting for. We need to be laying up spiritual treasures, heavenly treasures, an inheritance of faith that we pass on from one generation to the next. If you get nothing else, I just hope we understand this, is that spiritual legacy is greater than a physical legacy. The faith that you pass on and that you inspire others with is more important and greater than the stuff you leave behind. And that's what Jesus is getting at. Because, come on. Everything that we leave, everything that we have, it's going to rust eventually. It's going to decay eventually. It's going to waste away eventually. The money's going to get spent eventually. But the only thing that's going to last forever in this world is God and people's souls. If you want to do something that really is going to matter and ripple throughout all eternity, we've got to invest in the lives of people and helping them know and follow Jesus so that they can live for eternity with us as well in paradise, in the kingdom of God. It's going to be an incredible thing, right? That's the only thing that's really going to matter in the end of time. How many of you have ever been somewhere that is really, really old? You go to somewhere, the U.S. has some of it, but you go to Europe and things are thousands of years old, right? Or you go to ancient Israel and you're like, wow, this stuff was from the time before Jesus or the time of Joshua. You're looking around and it's incredible to see all this stuff. But you know what's really interesting? When you go look at all these archaeological sites or these historic places and monuments and things, you know what a common theme is in almost all of them? Maybe you've noticed this. Almost all of them are under some kind of renovation. You ever notice that? They're almost always under some kind of repair somewhere. Why? Because over time, just the elements, just the sun, just the rain, just the weather eventually erodes all of these buildings and these monuments that people have built. Just the effect of people marching around and walking, all these tourists walking around things eventually erodes it and decays it, and they have to fix it and repair it. And so they're constantly under renovation, constantly trying to fix these things and to restore them and keep them up so that they don't become completely deteriorated and eventually, over hundreds, maybe thousands of years, it would just be dust like everything else. The things we make on earth, they don't last, do they? Even Joshua's stones, are they still there today? I don't think so. I was trying to figure it out. And over thousands of years, eventually they got moved or whatever. But the thing that's going to last forever are the spiritual things, the things that we do for Christ. A good example of this kind of spiritual legacy is found in the book of 2 Timothy. In the book of 2 Timothy, Paul is writing to his young disciple, Timothy, and look at this legacy of faith, this chain of faith that we see in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 3. Here's what Paul writes to Timothy. He says, "I thank God whom I serve, as did my ancestors." So Paul's saying, look, my faith is not just my faith. I inherited this legacy from my ancestors who followed the Lord, right? Paul didn't always follow God perfectly, did he? But he always followed God passionately. And that is because of the inheritance of faith that he was passed on from his ancestors. And then he says, with a clear conscience, as I remember you constantly in my prayers night and day, as I remember your tears, I long to see you that I may be filled with joy. I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. So even Paul is saying to Timothy, I was the recipient of this inheritance of faith from my ancestors, and you, Timothy, you're a recipient of the faith of your grandmother and your mother who passed it on to you. That's your legacy of faith. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because you think Timothy, the apostle Paul, is literally his mentor, right? You think it'd be like the faith that I passed on to you as the apostle Paul, but he doesn't do that. He's like, look, it's not even faith you got from me. It's a faith you got from your grandmother. How amazing is that? And yeah, Paul discipled him and mentored him and taught him and coached him and encouraged him and all those things. He owed a lot to Paul, but his faith came from his family as well. It's a beautiful thing. And we see this legacy there, right? But here's the thing, a legacy of faith is not just about your biological children. Whether you have kids or not, it's not just about passing faith on to your kids from the ancestry. It's also about your spiritual children. The Apostle John writes it about it this way. Look at 3 John verse 4. He says, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. John says, I have no greater joy than knowing that my children are still walking with the Lord. And he's not talking about his biological kids here. He's talking about his children in the faith. He's talking about all his spiritual children, all the people that he has pastored and preached to and encouraged and met with and prayed for constantly. These are the people he's talking about, right? His spiritual children, his legacy of faith that he's passed on, that he learned from Jesus and that he has passed on to all the people that he's been preaching and teaching and pastoring and discipling. That's the kind of legacy of faith that John's talking about. He's saying he's got no greater joy than seeing these children continuing to walk in faith and walk in the truth of God's word. Pretty awesome. And these spiritual children, we see this kind of shift from the Old Testament to the New Testament, right? In the Old Testament, we see Joshua, he's got his 12 stones set up. But in the New Testament, it's not the physical monument of stones that are being built. We see that in the New Testament, we see more talk about stones. But instead of this physical pile of stones, what it's talking about now is spiritual stones. And the greatest spiritual stone is Jesus. The Bible tells us he is their cornerstone. He is the most important stone. And all of us who believe in him are also like spiritual stones building up Christ's church with him. Look what it says in 1 Peter chapter 2. Verse 4, as you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious. This is speaking of Jesus. He's a living stone. You yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house to be holy, a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For it stands in Scripture, behold, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone, chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. So the honor is for you who believe. But for those who do not believe, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone and a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. They stumble because they disobey the word as they were destined to do. And then verse 9, he continues, it says, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. So what's this getting at? Jesus is the cornerstone. The cornerstone was the first stone that was set. It's the most important stone. Why? Because based on where you set that first stone in the building is how you set every other stone around it, right? It sets the pace, it sets the mold, it sets the pattern of how you're gonna build this building. And Jesus is our cornerstone. He's our firm foundation. He is our guide, right? And every single person who follows in his legacy that he has left for us is like a stone building up his spiritual church, his spiritual house, Christ's cathedral, so to speak. And that's the kind of legacy that we're building. That's the kind of legacy that's going to last forever. Where one day every single believer who believes in Christ will not just be worshiping here right now, but we will be worshiping together with God in eternity in the total church, right, through Christ. It's gonna be an incredible thing. And so that's the kind of legacy I hope that we're leaving behind. That's the kind of legacy that we want. All these earthly things, these earthly monuments won't last, but what we do for Christ, what we do spiritually, these are the things that are going to ripple through all eternity. In my office, I have these two poster boards that I have, big poster boards on the back of my wall. My wife got them for me for Father's Day. She's awesome. And it's one of my favorite quotes of all time. I stumbled across it years back. And it's by this old British missionary. His name is C.T. Studd. What a cool name, right? Such a stud, literally. Like he is, C.T. Studd. But the guy was awesome because he's this British missionary from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he wrote this poem. And in the poem is this one line that he repeats over and over again that I thought was just super powerful. And that's what's hanging on my wall. It says this: "Only one life 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." And this is so true, isn't it? And when I see this hanging in my wall, it's a reminder to me, like, don't be building a kingdom for yourself. Don't be building your kingdom on anything else. Build it on Christ. That's all that's going to matter in the end. That's all that's going to last, right? The only thing that's going to matter for all eternity is what we do with Christ and what we do for Christ. That's what's going to matter. That's what my hope is that we will be about as a church. Like, that's the kind of legacy we want. Not about us, not about making our name great, not about making the name of ACC great, but about making Christ great. So the question I have just for us that just kind of begs to ask today is just what legacy will you leave? What kind of legacy will you leave behind? You know, we do a lot of funerals here. And it's always interesting just to hear the stories that people tell when they gather to talk about their loved ones who have passed. And they always tell these stories, you know, of things that they remember about their lives and that kind of thing, kind of like what I did with my dad while we were still with him this last week. And you know, sometimes they tell these amazing stories of just this incredible impact of faith, and other times it's very kind of superficial and a little sad. You know, they're like, "Oh man, Dad, he was a fisherman. He loved to fish." And they just talk about fishing or something. And then, oh, he loved golf. You know, oh man, we got together with the buddies and we golfed a lot. It was great. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with any of those things, but like, is that it? Your whole life sum up as golf, you know, fishing. She loved to cook. She was a great cook, and I love to eat good cooking. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But if that it, they cooked a lot of good stuff. And sometimes I'm sitting there like, I'm waiting for something more, like something significant, something even greater. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But it's like, what are people going to say about you one day when you're passed? What will they say about you when it's your funeral? You know, maybe it'll be, my hope is that it'll be something more meaningful. Like, yeah, they love to fish, but as we went fishing together, they would always tell me stories about what God did in their life. And it was such an encouragement to me in my faith. Or yeah, they loved golfing, but every time we were golfing, you know, they were such an inspiration to me with how they just talked about Jesus and how they did this or that or the other. Like, that's the kind of legacy I'm hoping we're leaving. Man, she loved to cook. She was so good at cooking. We loved eating her food, but every time she invited us over, she would always pray, and eventually she got us coming to church. You know, something like that. Like that's the kind of stuff I'm hoping we're leaving behind, right? These legacies of faith, not just he was a good golfer. You know, what kind of legacy will we be leaving behind? How are we going to make this one and only life that God has given us count? Let's build on something that's going to last. Here's a church. We have this mission statement that we have. We're church. As a church, we're all about making disciples who love God, love people, and love the Bible. That's what we want to be about as a church. And that's a great place to start. If you're looking at leaving a spiritual legacy, how are you making disciples who love God, love people, and love the Bible? And how are you doing that yourself? I like to think of it this way. Imagine we go out to the parking lot right after this, and I'm like, hey, come here, I want to show you something. I walk you out to the parking lot, and there's this brand new like red Corvette. And I'm like, I want to give you this Corvette as my legacy to you. And you'd say, wow, Brandon, that's amazing. I can't believe you would give me your car. And I say, it's not my car. That's John's car. I just want to give it to you as my legacy to you. And you'd look at me the same way you're looking at me right now, like that's really ridiculous, because it is, right? Because you can't give away what you don't have. And so if you want to leave a legacy of faith, you got to start with having faith yourself. So maybe today's the day that you start turning to Jesus and you say, Jesus, I want to trust in you for the forgiveness of my sins and receive the salvation that you promised and start walking with you. Maybe you've been walking with God for a while, but your faith's kind of been shaky and weak, and it's time for you to say, this is the year I'm turning to Christ. I'm gonna be more consistent in my faith. I'm gonna learn the Bible more. I'm gonna make a difference. I'm gonna start serving. I'm gonna do something for God, or just start working and growing in my faith, joining the church, something, right? Like start there. Start with your faith. And then as you grow in your faith, then you get to a point where you can look behind you and see other people who are further down that path than you are, behind that path than you are. And you can mentor them and disciple them and encourage them the same that you've been encouraged by others. Start there. Another way that we can leave a legacy is just with what we're doing with these buildings that are out here, right? You saw the big fences coming in. Tomorrow morning, they're knocking down the D and the E buildings. It's going to be exciting stuff. I tried to get them to let me have a sledgehammer or a bulldozer or something. They said no. Apparently, it's a liability. Probably not a good idea, so that's okay. But we're building these new buildings, not because buildings are the greatest thing in the world or that the buildings are going to last forever, but these buildings are going to outlast many of us. And these buildings are going to be a tool where we get to do more than just have a building, but where we get to teach the Bible week in and week out and gather people together to help them get connected with other people, to grow in their faith. And we're going to be making a difference in building a legacy here that's going to outlast us, a spiritual legacy of many people who are going to hear the good news of Jesus for the first time and be encouraged in their faith. So that's another thing that we get to be part of if you're giving to that or you're helping in that in any way. That's one other way that we are leaving a legacy here of faith. So here's just the question I have for all of us today is, what legacy will you leave? As C.T. Studd said, only one life will soon be passed. Only what's done for Christ will last. Let's make a difference with this one and only life for Jesus Christ.